Hello. So we're here talking about Chromebooks. We all dread them, but they're here to take over. So without further ado, next slide. So, brief little history of Chromebooks. So the Chromium project was started in 2008. What? Ah, I see. I suck at mics, don't worry. Chromium projects began in 2008, first hardware in 2011 at Google I/O of all places. Imagine that, Google. And they became very popular in schools, and they're just starting to get everywhere. They've actually overcome Mac OS in the most popular consumer OS in 2020. For better, for worse. Statistics there, source, IDC, some, data harvesting firm. Next, the hardware. So what used to be cheap hardware, just crap, absolute crap, plastic. Hinge is terrible, very, very terrible. I've had early Chromebooks. Became the same. The hardware is still kind of meh. However, it's a bit better now. And there's now more premium stuff. Way more premium stuff. For example, like my Pixelbook Go that I have for testing, it actually is not just plastic. So, on next would be the features of Chrome OS, which would be the next slide. So, quite literally used to be a browser window with some status indicators. Now it has Android apps. Unoptimized Android apps, I should say, because no one puts an effort into doing tablet porting, let alone Chrome OS porting. That's just marketing. Linux apps, however, are actually kind of decent. You can pass through USB devices via this built-in settings app, and GPU acceleration for you gamers that are, for whatever reason, getting Chromebooks. Cool, I guess. Maybe for some CAD? So, Chrome OS is actually based on Gen 2 Linux, believe it or not. It's very devolved from Gen 2, I will say. It still has portage, though. But it also uses Core Boot as the firmware, along with a specialized payload that Google develops called Depth Charge. Core Boot and payloads Core Boot's an open source firmware, and it uses payloads to boot into other things. So, yeah, it's just booting. However, it does some fun stuff, as I'm going to get into the next slide. So, one more slide over. So it uses verified boot. Essentially calculates a hash, a SHA-2 hash of the rewrite firmware, and then takes a signature of that, an RSA signature, and verifies that with a private key in the read-only firmware. Just for verified boot, the read-write firmware then computes hashes of other non-volatile parts of the firmware, making it hold on. Yeah, it's signed by the firmware subkey. Next slide. And additional protections include, block level verification via DM Verity, which DM Verity, instead of them doing ahead of time rootfs verification, because that will cost like 5 seconds off the boot time, and Google's like, we need fast boot time. Instead, we're going by a block-by-block basis on demand, which actually does not seem that inefficient. Usually each time you read from the block, it only has like a 0.2 millisecond overhead. And then it also has, everything in a stateful partition that's actually like user data. And that's encrypted via the TPMs, well, not encrypted via TPM, but uses a TPM to store the encryption keys, like similar to BitLocker. And then it uses AB partition schemes for just redundancy as well as making updates smooth. And then everyone probably is like, wait, this description of the talk said it was open. Where's the open? It sounds very locked down. However, next slide. Introducing developer mode. Developer mode is a very, very powerful thing. It's also easy to get into. Press a few key combos and follow some prompts, and bam, you now have a basic access and ownership of your device. That may sound like it defeats the whole point of all these security features whenever someone could just take ownership of your device. But next slide, that's why. Every boot you will see this screen, and the average user is like, it only tells me to press space. So when you press space, it actually reverts all of that. A user that actually knows what they're doing and is actually wanting to use developer mode, they know the hidden key combo, Control-D, to boot this thing. And there's also other key combos, because as I get into the next slide, developer mode lets you actually do a lot of things. Control-U lets you boot off of a custom Chrome OS media, which or Chromium OS rather, since you're not officially supposed to, run Google's proprietary operating system. No. And you can run Linux or Windows via the Control-L shortcut, because depending on your Chromebook, you're either getting legacy BIOS booting or UEFI booting, which means you can nuke the whole thing if you wanted to, and just boot, your plain old operating systems. But we could take this a step further. Next slide. And you could just flash a completely different operating system, firmware. Since, like I said earlier, Chromebooks are using Core Boot, which is a completely open source firmware, and Google, when they made Chromebooks, want the user to be able to also own their device. They have the same philosophy with Android phones. You can write the firmware after disabling write protect on some old write protect screw on older models by unscrewing the screw, and sometimes you have to peel off that film because that's still there. Everyone likes film. But on newer models, they use a custom chip called a CR50. That definitely is a chromium element pun. In order to disable write protect on that, you unplug the battery. You boot the system without the battery plugged in, and voila. You could also, if you want to, you can use closed shafting debugging. However, I'm not going to talk about that much because I just simply have no experience with that. And the documentation's a little bit of a clusterfuck, if you ask me. But what you can also do is that since you can flash your own firmware, this opens up the read-only firmware that I was talking about earlier to let you flash your own private key, or not private key, that'd be bad, public key, and completely re-ownership your device, custom build a Chromium with your own signing keys, and it'll be just like stock. No one will ever notice, and it's not Google, because fuck Google. And on the next slide, as I described on it, There's a few drawbacks to this. Yes, there could be some, it's not, completely foolproof. Generally, Reboot will fix it. However, if you have a very persistent threat, and they have some quality time to your hardware, physical access, mind you, yeah, they can probably bypass most of the protections, and all you see is, oh, look, my device randomly was reset. Sometimes Chrome OS does that, legit. Oh, in this case, yeah, you just got absolutely pwned by a malicious firmware and a malicious operating system. But if you're like that, if someone's actually that persistent towards you, you're fucked anyways. Why bother? Yeah, and yeah, I guess that's actually about it. I gave myself plenty of time for questions. So, actually first about me. I'm just a college student at KU doing computer engineering. Discord tag is up there. I'm not going to bother pronouncing it since mic is not good quality enough for me to be able to actually get that. So, but I'm also definitely, right now my job is in a kind of a sticky situation. So if anyone has any job opportunities, please get in touch with me. I'm scared. I need a job. COVID was not fun on my grades, and I don't have a scholarship anymore. So.
Take private loans. Nothing bad will happen, I promise.
Shut.
You totally won't regret it.
I already regret my federal loans. But, I also am part of the KU Information Security Club. So if any of you guys are KU students, which I don't think you are, because you all look a bit older than that, hit us up. We'll gladly take you.
Just call us old. It's not wrong.
But yeah, any questions? I used to, and I use it occasionally. However, over at the audio station, I have a nice M1 MacBook. You might be asking, why am I talking about Chrome OS? Well, fuck Google. Just simply, fuck Google. The main reason why this talk exists was because we had just had a nice fun conversation in SecKC Discord. And we were just like, you know what'd be cool? This talk. So here we go. It is just merely convenience. Any other questions?